All right, so a lot of developing news over the last 72 hours. We're going to be discussing World War III threats, U.S. draft concerns, what is going on with Russia, Poland, drone attacks in their airspace, and how the United States has come out and said that they will be directly involved in all the conflict that is about to take place. We're going to be seeing where we go from here. I've got a lot of video footage and articles, so let's just go ahead and dive right in and get you caught up as to what has been going on over the last 72 hours. So the U.S. says that it will defend every inch of NATO territory after Poland shoots down a Russian drone. Now, this happened about 3 days ago. I'm going to get you all the details as more has been developing and get you all the information. Take a look. Poland, coming out today, September the 13th, scrambles jets amid a renewed drone threat in nearby Ukrainian territory. We're hearing they are getting ready right now as we speak. NATO makes a major announcement as they bolster their eastern flank against Russia. This coming out in the last 24 hours. The United States has got a lot to say about this. Rubio calls Russian drones over Poland unacceptable, but they have declined to say whether this was intentional or not. Now, Donald Trump issues an ultimatum for NATO countries on Russian sanctions. This coming out in the last 27 minutes today, September the 13th, 2025. We got new developing news coming out from Donald Trump on the conflict. And take a look at this. Washington and Beijing step up war preparation threats for World War III. Now, I see the date on it says September 22nd, 2025. That is not correct. We are still 9 days away from the 22nd. I believe that's supposed to be September 12th. This article has come out in the last 24 hours. And take a look at this. World War III fear is real. What will happen if Russia-Poland conflict activates NATO Article 4 and 5? Drop it in the comments if you know what it is. You can see it here in the first line of this article. World War III, Articles 4 and 5. If one nation in NATO goes to war, we're going to be seeing some of the other ones all piling in. And as I mentioned, we've heard the United States getting in on the rhetoric as well as a part of NATO. Drop WW3 if you think that is the direction we're going to be going. Now, if not, put peace. Let me know your thoughts. But take a look at this. This coming out just recently as well. If World War III erupts, these are the first U.S. citizens who will get drafted. And they're going to be ages 18 to 30, according to this article. They're saying that this could be reinstated. And why is there such concern around reinitiating the draft in the United States? Well, it's because they said the last time that it was initiated or it was taken from initiation was about 70 years ago, if I remember correctly, off the top of my head. It might be wrong. Don't quote me on that, but they said that the reserves that we had back then is 10 times what we have now today. And there's a lot of difficulty with drafting for our various military forces, the Marines, the Navy, the Air Force, all of these ones. They're saying we're running short. And if we were to enter into conflict, there's some that are concerned that we might need to go that route. And that is why we're seeing articles coming out like this now with tensions that have been escalating between NATO, Russia, the United States, Poland in the last 72 hours. So I'm going to dive into the latest, get you caught up on everything that has been going on. And yes, this happened. The development happened on the same day that we saw the Charlie Kirk assassination. So a lot has been taking place the past couple of days. I'm going to dive right in. I'm going to get you caught up on the latest, put it on the screen, read right from it, play for you the video footage so you can see it for yourself and know and rest assured that this is the latest. Now, do me a favor. Before we dive in, if you appreciate that, please take a quick second, hit that thumbs up like button for me. Helps spread this out further across the YouTube platform while we're live. Really helps out the channel a ton. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Also, to stay up to date, it is totally free. Why not? Hit that subscribe button. I'll keep you up to speed on everything from the Charlie Kirk assassination, what is going on with global conflict around the world, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, the adversaries of the United States, our economic situations right here, legislation coming out, Social Security. We have an assortment of different things that are going on. Keep you up to speed on all of it here on the channel. But let's go ahead and dive into the latest video footage that has come out in about the last 2 hours, as we're hearing that Trump is vowing action after Russian drones breach NATO ally Poland. And like I said, we're going to get into the details of the concerns of what this means for U.S. involvement, potential World War III. Let me know, are we going to World War III? If If you think so, drop a WW3 in the comments. But let's go ahead and take a look at the latest video footage.
Meanwhile, world leaders are also very closely watching as Poland faced this suspected Russian drone incursion this week. President Trump announced this morning that he is ready to impose major sanctions on Russia when all NATO members get on board. We have retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Mark Wetherington with us right now. Sir, thank you. Our gratitude to you for your time this morning. A pretty significant announcement here from the president, who posted on Truth Social regarding sanctions. But what he says is, I am ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing when all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia. Your thoughts on how he is calling out NATO in this moment?
Well, Molly, thanks for having me. And I think this is a very significant moment for NATO. It's clear that more needs to be done to shore up the defense, and many of the nations have been moving that direction. We've seen very, very positive progress from the Secretary General, Mark Rutte, as well as from the Supreme Allied Commander, and we've seen NATO nations stepping up to the plate to try to make a difference. But still, much more must be done to counter Russian activity, such as this very reckless and deliberate incursion into Polish airspace.
Which brings us to our next topic here, how swiftly NATO nations did respond to this drone incursion. They showed that, they were ready. So it's interesting how it's being addressed, though. The President Trump, said the incursion this week could have been a mistake. However, the conservative president in Poland has been very clear, relatively new to office, but posting on social media that this was nothing more than an attempt to test our capabilities and response. Your thoughts on how intentional this was?
Yes, Molly, it appears to me that it was very deliberate, given the scale of the incursion and given the consistent flight paths of those vehicles. It appears that it was a deliberate act, whether that was to probe Polish airspace and understand the NATO response, whether that was to gain an advantage, an operational advantage in their fight against Ukraine, remains to be seen. But I do believe it was deliberate.
I want to talk a little bit more about NATO's response before we move on. Since the negotiations began, with Putin traveling to Alaska just very, very recently, the attacks on Ukraine have also grown tremendously, and the deaths and the attacks not only on really on the local people as well as infrastructure. Your thoughts on what appears to be a ramp up right now, even as these peace negotiations and the pressure is also ramping up?
Well, it's been very clear since 2014 that Putin and the Russian Federation does not respect Ukraine as a sovereign, independent nation. They've demonstrated that on multiple occasions, and it's clear that this is a tough fight, and they're very much stepping up the pressure, and it's a very difficult ongoing fight for Ukraine, and hopefully it will not expand beyond that to our NATO neighbors.
Yeah, switching gears between Israel and Hamas now, I want to fit this in. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, traveling to Israel this week after this Israeli strike in Qatar that escalated tensions in the region. What do you want to see come from this visit from the Secretary of State?
So there you have it, you guys. So we are seeing things escalate with Russia and Poland with that drone attack. And also, you hear that there are things escalating with Israel and Qatar as well. Now, in addition to that, let's take a look at some of these articles so that way you can see what is coming out here with the United States' response to all this. As the U.S. says that it will defend every inch of NATO territory after Poland shoots down a Russian drone. Now, it says the U.S.-led military alliance said that it would bolster defenses along its eastern flank after the incursion, the first of its kind since Ukraine's war began. Russia denied targeting Poland. Now, let's take a look at this. And as you heard, NATO responded very quickly to this. They see this as a major threat and escalation from Russia. They are not buying that it was not an attack, that it was not a major threat or event. And we're hearing that the United States did not say whether it was or was not. But right now, NATO is saying this is a threat. The United States vowed yesterday, to defend every inch of NATO territory after a number of suspected Russian drones entered Polish airspace during an attack on Ukraine. Tensions have been high across Europe as leaders condemn the airspace violation on Wednesday, a first since Moscow's full-scale invasion of its neighbor in February of 2022, as the latest sign of escalation from the Kremlin, which has rebuffed President Donald Trump's bid to broker a peace talk. And we're going to be seeing some footage from him here in just a second on that. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that it was the closest we have been to open conflict since World War II, and that is why we're seeing headlines I'm going to share with you in a second here that they're saying we're on the brink of World War III. But Moscow has downplayed the incident, saying it has no plans to target facilities in Poland. Do you trust Russia's word? Let me know in the comments, yes or no. Trump said Thursday that Russia's alleged drone incursion into Poland could have been a mistake, but his acting U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Dorothy Shea, appeared to try to reassure Washington's NATO allies on Friday following Trump's remarks. Violating the airspace of a U.S. ally, intentionally or otherwise, showed immense disrespect for good faith U.S. efforts to bring an end to this conflict, she told the UN Security Council. The United States stands by our NATO allies in the face of these alarming airspace violations, she said, and rest assured, we will defend every inch of NATO territory. Now, Poland and the U.S. are members of NATO, which at its core is a mutual defense pact formed after World War II to address the threat posed by the Soviet Union, meaning an attack on one may be considered an attack on all. NATO on Friday launched Operation Eastern Sentry to bolster the defense of Europe's eastern flank in response to the strikes, which saw the drone shot down with the help of NATO allies. Now, we must, as NATO, make clear our resolve and our ability to defend our territory. And that is exactly what Eastern Sentry is designed to do, NATO Secretary General Matt Rutte said at a news conference at the organization's headquarters in Brussels. Now, Rutte made the announcement standing beside NATO's top commander, U.S. Air Force General Alexis Grinkowicz, who said military activity would commence in the coming days, involving a range of assets from allies including Denmark, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, and others. Now, Rutte said NATO was still weighing the possible intent behind the alleged incursion, but called the actions reckless and unacceptable, whether intentional or not. NATO already has substantial assets in Eastern Europe, including thousands of troops. It did not specify how many additional troops would be involved in the new operation. Moscow has intensified its bombing of Ukrainian cities and infrastructure since Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin held a peace summit in Alaska nearly a month ago. European allies have said that these large-scale aerial assaults indicate that Putin has no interest in bringing the war in Ukraine to a close. And there you have it. And let's go ahead and take a look at some more video footage here. As you're going to see, Donald Trump saying he is starting to get very frustrated with Vladimir Putin as he is trying to get him to the table, trying to get something brokered, hearing Putin say, yes, I'm on board for it, and then that same day going and doing even greater attacks against Ukraine. Let's go ahead and take a look at the video footage so you can see it for yourself.
I thought the easiest one was going to be Ukraine and Russia.
But the problem is really Vladimir Putin. You talked to him in Alaska.
Yeah, I did.
He has picked up the pace of the bombing.
Look, there's tremendous hatred between him and Zelensky. Tremendous. It's I've seen it before.
But Zelensky says I'm coming to the table.
Well, now he does. No, now he does. He wasn't coming to the table so quickly. You remember the famous...
So is your patience run out with Putin?
Yeah, it's sort of running out and running out fast. But it does take two to tango. It's amazing. When Putin wants to do it, Zelensky didn't. When Zelensky wanted to do it, Putin did. Now Zelensky wants to, and Putin is a question mark. But we're going to have to come down very, very strong. It's the only one. This is the one, because I've always had a great relationship with Putin. This is the only war that I haven't solved. Now, let's get into Gaza, because that's another one. So those are two that are...
Before you move on, can I ask you,
complex.
what is clamping down on Vladimir Putin?
Well, it'll be hitting very hard with sanctions to banks and having to do with oil and tariffs also. But I've already done it. I've done a lot. Look, India was their biggest customer. I put a 50% tariff on India because they're buying oil from Russia. That's not an easy thing to do. That's a big deal. And it causes a rift with India, you know. And remember this is a Europe problem much more than our problem. The other thing I've done, Brian, and I know how you feel and very strongly about it, and I understand a lot of people do and a lot of people don't, frankly. But we were spending $350 billion on a war that was across the ocean. Europe was spending $100 billion. It's still a lot of money, but it should have been equalized, at least equalized, or they should have spent more. But I did something. As you know, I went to NATO, great relationship with all of those NATO countries, and I got them to raise from 2% to 5%. And then I got them to pay for anything that all of our costs now are being paid by NATO. So NATO is very, you know, they're rich countries, and they're now paying. We're sending missiles and things to NATO. NATO's paying us, and they're distributing to where they want, which is, in this case, Ukraine.
Mr. President.
Which is a big saving. That's a big difference. We're not spending, but you know what I want to do?
Yeah.
I want to stop it for a different reason. Because now, I guess you could say we make money. I don't want to make money, but we're making money but I want to stop it because they're losing 6,000 to 7,000 soldiers every single week. And they're not American soldiers. They're Russian and Ukrainian soldiers. And some people in the towns. But the big numbers are the soldiers. They're losing. Last week, they lost 7,018 soldiers. A little bit more Russia than Ukraine, but they both, you know, they've lost 1.5 million soldiers fighting back and forth. I want to stop it on a human basis. You know, their souls, they're Russian souls, they're Ukraine, they're not American.
Yeah.
But I just feel I have an obligation to do it.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And
There you have it, you guys. Now, I saw somebody mention this in the comments, and let me know if you agree. They're saying that we're going to be going to war and that there's going to be a U.S. draft soon. Do you agree? Do you think that is where we're going next? If so, put yes. If no, put no. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But as I mentioned, we're hearing that right now NATO is responding to what is going on, saying regardless of intentional or not, that Russia has crossed a line. And the United States said that they're going to be by NATO's side to support them every step of the way, because right now things are intensifying. So we just read this article as the United States said they're going to be supporting every inch of NATO territory. Take a look at this. Poland is now scrambling its jets amid renewed drone threats in nearby Ukrainian territory. This is actually happening as we speak. And take a look. NATO makes a major announcement. They're bolstering their eastern flank against Russia. So we are seeing that not just Poland, but all of NATO is preparing for potential escalation, war, and attacks. Let's go ahead and take a look at this article in more detail. And as always, these are cited in the description. So you can click it, go read it for yourself. And again, if you appreciate that, if you haven't done so yet, please click that like button. Just need 50 more likes to get 900 while we're live. We've got over 3,000. It looks like 3,400 people live with me right now. So let's take a look at this article here, right here. Poland has scrambled aircrafts in a preventative operation in local airspace amid renewed threats of Russian drone strikes on nearby Ukrainian territories, according to the operational command of the Polish armed forces. The threat has forced authorities to close the airport in the Polish city of Lublin, and the air sirens have sounded across more than half a dozen countries. However, the operation concluded shortly after, with the Polish Air Forces reporting that it'll continue to monitor the situation in Ukraine and remain in constant readiness to ensure the security of the national airspace. Now, here's why it matters. Poland remains on high alert after 19 Russian drones violated its airspace earlier this week. None of the drones appeared to target Poland, but were merely traveling its airspace to strike targets in eastern Ukraine. Polish forces, in partnership with some North Atlantic Treaty Organization or NATO ally aircraft, shot down some of the drones. Officials then invoked NATO Article 4 in response. Now, the attack raised significant questions about Russia's motives amid its ongoing war with Ukraine that began February of 2022, with NATO launching an eastern sentry to bolster defenses along the alliance's eastern flank. Moscow has rejected accusations that it intentionally targeted Poland, with Kremlin propagandists pushing the line that Russia is being unfairly accused. So here's what to know. Alerts started appearing on Saturday on the official profile of the operational command of the Polish Armed Forces account on X, warning that the forces have scrambled aircrafts and activated ground-based air defenses and radar reconnaissance systems. Again, that is today. Now, it says the first alert went out around 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or 5:30 p.m. local time, citing the threat of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, strikes in regions of Ukraine bordering Poland. Polish and ally aircraft scramble in response, but the Polish command stressed that these actions are preventative in nature and are aimed at securing the airspace and protecting citizens, particularly in areas adjacent to threatened regions, according to a translation from the Post. Now, the operation continued for around 2 hours, with a follow-up post at 12:35 p.m. announcing that the operation had concluded and that all systems had resumed standard operation activities. So what is NATO's Article 4? And this is where a lot of people are concerned about us entering into World War III. And we're going to be taking a look at those articles here in just a second. NATO's Article 4 stated that the parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. Now, the more well-known Article 5 involves the collective defense of all NATO allies against another state or entity that has attacked a member, while Article 4 initiates formal discussions among members following a breach of territorial integrity and security. So we're hearing that Article 4 is the initiation. Article 5 is the act of war, which they're saying will be World War III. So here's what people are saying. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk wrote on X, due to the threat posed by Russian drones operating over Ukraine near the border with Poland, preventative operations of aviation, Polish and allied, have begun in our airspace. Ground bases, air defense systems have reached the highest state of readiness. In a subsequent post, he wrote, threat level canceled. Thank you to all involved in the operation in the air and on the ground. We remain vigilant. So here's what's next. Poland has called for a meeting with NATO officials after invoking Article 4 of the Alliance Charter and will review the incident and share the findings with its allies. Meanwhile, the fallout from the airspace breach continues to heighten tensions between Russia and the West, and that is why, as I mentioned, we are seeing articles coming out saying that the U.S. says that it will defend every inch of NATO's territory after Poland shoots down those Russian drones. And now we are seeing NATO, Poland, going and guarding that eastern flank against Russia. All this coming out in the last 24 hours. Now, let's take a look at some more updates, some more video footage to get you caught up as to what is going on here. Now, this all initiated with what was those drone attacks. So for those of you who missed it, this came out the same day that we saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Since that unfolded about 72 hours ago, we have just seen things escalate. And that is why today we're hearing those warnings coming out from Donald Trump. We're going to be covering that in just a second. Let's take a look at this video footage from 3 days ago so you can see exactly what unfolded.
Poland is on high alert after NATO warplanes shoot down Russian drones that flew deep into Polish airspace. Chief correspondent, foreign correspondent Trey Yingst joins us live from Kyiv. Trey.
Yeah, Brian, good morning. Overnight, Russia launched another massive attack against Ukraine, but this time sent 19 drones into Poland. The incident triggered a NATO response with fighter jets scrambling from Western Europe to assist. Polish officials say at least 4 of the drones were shot down as the country briefly closed its airspace and diverted flights from major airports. The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk released a statement following the incident saying, quote, "My thanks and congratulations to the Polish Operational Command and our NATO pilots for shooting down Russian drones over Poland. Actions speak louder than words." Tusk has now invoked Article 4 of NATO, meaning that consultations will take place with NATO members about a security assessment and a possible response. You can see some of the damage caused by this drone incursion in the aftermath video taken from eastern Poland. The EU condemned this event, with the Commission President saying this.
And just today we have seen a reckless and unprecedented violation of Poland and Europe's airspace by more than 10 Russian Shahid drones. Europe stands in full solidarity with Poland.
In addition to the events in Poland, Ukraine came under heavy bombardment with more than 400 Russian drones and 20 missiles. Brian?
All right, Trey, that is amazing. They basically won after a NATO ally. So I don't know how long we're going to sit on the sidelines with this.
Right.
Trey Yanks, thanks.
Thank you.
That was 3 days ago, and what we're hearing is now the time is up. United States will not be sitting on the sidelines. Let's go ahead and take a look at some more updates, as we had also heard that Donald Trump had issued threats to Russia saying, hey, you need to end this, stop with all the conflict, and we heard that Russia had just kind of laughed it off. Let's take a look at this video footage as well.
Russia dismissing President Trump's threat of new sanctions after the country launched its largest air attack of the war on Kyiv on Sunday. The Kremlin saying, quote, no sanctions will be able to force the Russian Federation to change the consistent position that our president has repeatedly spoken about. Former Secretary of State, Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo joins us now. Mr. Secretary, I think the verdict's in. Russia has no interest in peace, and they're not pretending anything different now. How should the president be reading this?
Well, first of all, Brian, I think you're absolutely right. I think Vladimir Putin has zero interest in any negotiated solution. He's going to stay at this until there's enormous cost imposed on him. So what does that mean for how President Trump and the West, Europe, importantly, should respond? Handful of tools, right? Real sanctions. So the Europeans shouldn't be buying Russian oil. It's crazy they're still funding this war. Second, we should permit deep strikes on military targets into Ukraine, imposing real costs on their military, taking down their capacity to extend this conflict. And then there's other financial things. You could go after Chinese banks. Chinese banks are funding this war. So there are many tools still in President Trump's arsenal. I think that's what it's going to take. Vladimir Putin's talking about Finland now. He is not going to give up short of real pressure.
The same rhetoric coming from Medvedev, the former president, about Finland is exactly the precursor in the statements made before the invasion of Ukraine. Finland is not unique. They are going after certain areas, saying they teach the Slavic people poorly in the 1940s, X, Y, and Z, making up some crazy history. That's why Finland joined NATO. They've already infiltrated Moldova. They have a plan to put 2,500 high-precision missiles. They're building them right now. They have a massive plan for expanding Russian drone production. And yet there's a report in the Financial Times today that the U.S. is slowing down delivery of air defense to Ukraine. Do you think that could be true?
I hope it's not. I hope we're not slowing down air defense. Remember, now the Europeans are buying these weapon systems for us, so the American taxpayer now is no longer underwriting this. We should be accelerating the air defense systems, not only for Ukraine, but for all of Europe, and we should be providing them the tools to go on offense as well.
And I watched Eldridge Colby as a commentator. He was not for this war. He said we should focus on China. Now he's in charge of procurement. Do you think he could be doing things without the president knowing it, or without the Secretary of War knowing it?
Seems hard to imagine that he could. They would certainly know about it. They can read the Financial Times too, but more importantly, they know what's going on in their team. President Trump always knew what was taking place. I'm confident President Trump, when he sees that this is what's taking place, this is not the way President Trump thinks about this. He's always been tough on Russia. He's always been willing to do the necessary to deter Vladimir Putin. No reason to think President Trump's changed.
So there was also a report on Friday, you probably read, they were pulling out some troop presence in the Baltic areas, beginning in Lithuania. Man, is that the wrong message to send?
Yeah, to the world. Xi Jinping would say that. Chairman Kim would say that. The Ayatollah in Iran would say that we're going to back away from a threat where Russia has stolen European ground and we back up. That is not the right message. And it's a message that feels more like a Biden administration than a Trump administration.
The Ukrainians are making progress. They're pushing back and taking back towns in the Donetsk region. I think the European leaders are coming here to work with the president. I give the president high marks saying, look, I know where Putin stands, but my goal is to end the war. But Putin's goal is totally different. And if he begins to embarrass the president, and for those people watching us saying that I want war, you want war, the way to avoid it is to show you're willing to fight it, and we're capable of winning it.
None of us want war. I was a soldier a long time ago. Wars are awful. In the end, you still have to protect American interests. And America has a deep, fundamental interest in making sure Vladimir Putin isn't seen as having succeeded in this war. It'll be a decade to try to get that back if Putin is perceived as having had a victory here.
I know you start teaching at Columbia this semester. Those are very lucky students. I hope they realize that.
Thanks, Brian.
There you have it, you guys. Now, let's go ahead and take a look as well as to what the United States has to say about all of this that is unfolding. Let's go ahead and take a look at this article here. It says Rubio calls Russian drones over Poland unacceptable, but has declined to say if it was intentional or not. Now, let me know your thoughts. Was this intentional? Yes or no? We've heard Ukraine warn about this. Ukraine has said that it's not going to stop with us. We're just phase one. We are the first step in Russia's attempt to take over. And they've said Poland is next, European nations, they are next. Russia is not going to back down. We're going to go into World War III. So Ukraine, Zelensky has been going around letting people know you need to support us, because if not, we are just the beginning of Russia's mission here. So do you think that, do you agree here with Rubio? The Russian drones over Poland are unacceptable. We have got to stop this. Let me know your thoughts. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. It says the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Saturday today said the incursion of the Russian drones into Polish airspace this week was unacceptable, that it remains unclear whether Russia had deliberately sent the drones into Polish territory. Do you think that they did this on purpose? Yes or no? Let me know your thoughts. NATO announced plans to beef up the defense of Europe's eastern flank on Friday yesterday after Poland shot down the drones that had violated its airspace, the first known shots fired by a member of the Western Alliance during Russia's war in Ukraine. We think it's unacceptable and unfortunate and dangerous development, Rubio told reporters before departing on a trip to Israel and Britain. No doubt about it, the drones were intentionally launched. The question is whether the drones were targeted to go into Poland specifically. Rubio said that if the drones had been targeted at Poland, if the evidence leads us there, then obviously that'll be a highly escalatory move. That would be an attack on a NATO nation, and that would involve all the NATO nations, including the United States. There are a number of other possibilities as well, but I think we'd like to have all the facts and consult with our allies before we make specific determinations, he added. Now, on Friday, Poland rejected Donald Trump's suggestion that the incursion could have been a mistake, a rare contradiction of the U.S. president from one of Washington's closest European allies. Its foreign minister told Reuters that Poland hoped Washington would take action to show solidarity with Warsaw. At the United Nations on Friday, the U.S. called the airspace violation alarming and vowed to defend every inch of NATO territory. Russia has said that its forces had been attacking Ukraine at the time of the drone incursions and that it had not intended to hit targets in Poland. So there you have it. Russia is claiming they did not do this on purpose. Poland is saying that's a bunch of baloney. The United States has declined to say, but they are saying they stand in solidarity with NATO. And now take a look at this. This coming out 27 minutes ago from the time that I started this live stream. Trump also issues an ultimatum for NATO countries on Russian sanctions, which we're hearing he is ready to initiate. Take a look at this with me. President Donald Trump issued an ultimatum to NATO allies in a letter today, saying the U.S. will issue major sanctions on Russia only when they agree to do the same and stop buying oil from Russia. Meeting Trump's demands would mark a major shift among the alliance, and there are major questions as to whether there would be collective interest in taking these steps. I am ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing, and when all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia, he said in the post on social media, quoting what he said was a letter sent to his NATO counterparts. He continued, "As you know, NATO's commitment to win has been far less than 100%, and the purchase of Russian oil by some has been shocking. It greatly weakened your negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. Anyway, I am ready to go when you are. Just say when." The president also called on NATO countries to significantly ramp up tariffs on China in a show of force. "I believe that this, plus NATO as a group, placing 50% to 100% tariffs on China to be fully withdrawn after the war with Russia and Ukraine is ended, will also be a great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war," he said. Trump added that Russia's war in Ukraine would end quickly if those steps were taken. CNN has reported that the European Union imposed a ban on maritime Russian oil imports and refined oil products like diesel, but many countries continue to import Russian fossil fuels and liquefy natural gas. Now, the president has repeatedly previewed the possibility of additional sanctions on Russia, telling Fox News, Fox and Friends on Friday that he's considering hitting very hard with sanctions to banks and having to do with oil and tariffs also. He has already doubled tariffs to 50% on India, which purchases oil from Russia, and acknowledged Friday the move caused a rift with the countries. India has argued that it's being unfairly targeted with the tariff increase, calling it unjustifiable given that other nations also do business with Moscow. It remains unclear whether NATO countries will take these steps, which would mark a dramatic departure from their existing tariff policies. Now, earlier this week, when the president spoke with a European delegation from the EU, he pushed them to 50 to 100% tariffs on both China and India, according to people familiar with the conversations. But notably, Trump's missive to his NATO counterparts on Saturday did not mention India. The EU is in final stages of negotiating a trade deal with India, so it was unlikely they would go along with that. Russia was the largest supplier of petroleum to the EU prior to Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The EU has since imposed a ban on maritime Russian oil imports as well as refined oil products like diesel. As a result, oil imports to Europe fell to 1.72 billion, 1.48 billion euros for the first quarter of 2025, down from 16.4 billion or 14.06 billion euros. Wow, a huge drop in the same quarter of 2021, according to the most recent data from Eurostat. The EU has slightly reduced Russia's market share of liquefied natural gas imports since 2021 from 22% down to 19% in 2025, while also greatly increasing the U.S. market share. And the bloc, which has been the Americans' partner in sanctions against Russia, imported 41.9 billion of goods from Russia in 2024, data from the EU's statistics agency shows. European officials said last week after the Trump meeting that new tariffs on China or India were unlikely, since that's not how they approach the use of tariffs, and the Europeans have generally been more cautious in trade wars, in particular with China. By issuing his Russian oil ultimatum to NATO instead of the EU, Trump is including Turkey, which is the third largest purchaser of Russian oil after China and India, in those demands. The EU has largely cut off oil purchases with the exception of Hungary and Slovakia, but Turkey is still a customer, underscoring the steep demands. Now, momentum to end the war around Trump's August 15th meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska has largely stalled, and Trump's latest demands risk prolonging the conflict even further. Time is a valuable commodity for Putin, giving Russia the ability to make more gains on the battlefield and shore up control over occupied areas. Russia has shown no signs of de-escalation. That's what we saw in that video footage. Russia, meanwhile, is showing few signs that it is interested in de-escalation. Romania's defense ministry said that it intercepted a drone that entered its airspace while Russia attacked Ukraine on Saturday. Wow. So we are hearing that Russia is all over the place right now, and that is why we're seeing articles coming out like this. Washington and Beijing step up war preparations as we enter a threat of World War III. And again, I know that the date on this says September 22nd. They had an error there. It's supposed to be September 12th, yesterday. Also, we are seeing ones coming out like this from the Economic Times that state World War III fear is real. What will happen if Russia-Poland conflict activates NATO Articles 4 and 5? And as you saw, Poland is saying that Article 4 should be initiated right now. They're gathering with other nations, and they're saying that there is a major threat coming from Russia at this time. The United States said, we will be right there by your side, defending every inch of NATO territory. People saying this could escalate to World War III, and that is why, take a look at this coming out as well. If World War III erupts, these are the first U.S. citizens who would get drafted for war. Man, let me know your thoughts. Are we going to see a U.S. draft if we go to war? If yes, put yes. If no, put no. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, we're going to take a look at those here in just a second. But first, I want to play for you some video footage as we're hearing that we are on the doorstep of catastrophe right now with everything that is going on with the conflict between Russia, Poland, Ukraine, NATO, and also the involvement of the United States. Let's go ahead and take a look.
President Trump is pressuring the European Union to impose 100% tariffs on China and India over their purchases of Russian oil. This is all in an effort to bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table and end the war in Ukraine. The EU, one of China's top trading partners, behind the United States, over $850 billion in goods traded, compared to $140 billion with India and nearly $80 billion with Russia. President Trump says he will be meeting with India's Prime Minister Modi on trade in the coming weeks. Let's bring in Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, great to see you once again. We talked about this on Monday with you and the fact that you've got this, axis of evil, but it's also coming down to the energy needs of India and their purchases of Russian energy, which still, now it's Thursday, they still have not signaled that they're going to stop doing.
Yes, and China continues to purchase Russian oil in large quantities. I think President Trump has lost patience with Vladimir Putin. Trump tried to accommodate Putin, gave him an off-ramp, and Putin hasn't taken it. And also, we saw early yesterday morning, Russia sent 19 drones into Polish airspace. And this is getting extremely serious. This is 1939, Cheryl. Poland has invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty. That's demanding consultations. That's one step away from Article 5. Article 5 is essentially war with the Russian Federation. So we are at the doorstep of catastrophe right now. And, I don't know where this goes, but I do hope that we start to impose those costs on Putin and on Xi Jinping to show them that we mean business. Because if we don't do that, they are going to continue to run against us.
And it goes back to the issue of this alliance between these leaders, and many say that that was a message that was being sent to the United States. Nobody would have been happier about that message than Vladimir Putin, to be clear. But there's a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning that says East is East, fears of the India-China-Russia alliance overblown. But, you have commentators, one on CNN, saying that those pictures of those leaders should send a chill down the spine of every American. Are these concerns overblown?
No, they're not. I mean, we have heard for a decade from the smart people in New York and Washington that Russia and China would never get together. And, they point out, well, these two countries have been historical adversaries, and that's absolutely true. And yes, their partnership of today probably won't last for 3 or 4 decades, but that's not what's important. What's important, Cheryl, is what Russia and China are doing right now. And right now, they're coordinating their policies, they're assaulting us. It's because they see the world in the same terms, and they view the United States as an enemy, and they can see that we are not willing to take adequate measures to protect ourselves, our friends, and our allies. And they view that as being feeble. Now, I believe that they're wrong, but that's the way they view things. And that's important because that determines the way they act.
I've got Marcus Simonis on the set with me. He's got a question for you, Gordon. Go ahead.
Well, when I think about where the real risk is, the risk is really around energy and what that's going to cause the U.S. to continue to ask the EU to do with tariffs. We know there's a difference between tariffs and sanctions. How do you see those two things playing out? Are there going to be sanctions, or are we going to keep playing this tariff game?
We got to do more than just the tariffs, Marcus. We have got to cut off the flow of money to Russia, because if there's no money for Russia, there's no war in Ukraine. And we have taken steps in that direction with sanctions, but we don't enforce them with the vigor that is absolutely necessary. And of course, the sanctions aren't as strict as they need to be in the first place.
Well, Gordon,
so tariffs are part of a package, but we need to go further.
When you say further, right, so we're talking about monetary policy. Cutting off the money to Russia is really about taking out the energy problem that's there. So when you say further, what does further mean to you?
It means that we have to make sure that neither the United States nor Europe nor our friends and partners around the world do any business with Russia.
All right. Well, obviously, if you look at the moves that China has made, what's interesting, and this just broke yesterday, Gordon, we found out that these lawmakers in Washington from the House Armed Services Committee there's a report they're planning a trip to China later this month, led by the way, a Democrat. I mean, this is just 1 week after we saw that visit between Modi and Putin and Xi Jinping. President Trump also potentially visiting South Korea next month. He could meet with Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC summit, Gordon. So what do you expect? And what do you think I'm not sure I understand what these lawmakers think they're going to do with China, because China doesn't seem to respond, from what I've seen, to dialogue. They respond to pressure and to threats.
Yes. I mean, we're Americans, so we think that we can talk everybody into seeing the world the way we do. But for decades, we've talked to China, and we have tried to convince them that they should calculate their interests the way we see it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And the problem here is that sometimes talking makes things worse. It makes it worse because the Chinese know what they're doing. They know that we're upset about it, and yet they see that we are not willing to use American power to coerce them. And so they believe that either we're feeble or that we're finished as a world power, which is what Xi Jinping has actually been telling people. So really at the point we need to say, look, yes, we've done with talking because this is only aggravating a situation. I know this is a message that people in democracies don't want to hear, but unfortunately, we're at 1939, and we have actually got to get to the point where we use our power to protect ourselves. It's just simple as that. And by the way, Cheryl, today is the 24th anniversary of 9/11. 9/11 occurred because we were unwilling to listen to what Osama bin Laden was saying about the United States, even after he killed 6 Americans in 1993 with the bombing of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So we have a problem with enemy identification. And this time our enemies have weapons that pose existential threats to the United States, unlike Osama bin Laden, unlike what happened in the 1930s.
There you have it, you guys, and let me know your thoughts. Are we going to be entering into World War III right now as we're seeing things escalate? And are we going to see the United States get involved in supporting NATO against Russia? Now, that is why we're seeing articles coming out like this. Washington and Beijing are stepping up their war preparations, threat of World War III, and this is surrounding the conflict with Russia and now Poland, the United States, NATO. Take a look here. World War III fear is real. What will happen if Russia-Poland conflict activates NATO Articles 4 and 5? And also, we've seen the concerns of the U.S. draft if we have the United States get heavily involved in this conflict. So let's take a look at these articles here very quickly. Now it says World War III related apprehensions have begun as Russia-Ukraine war seems to have escalated after Russian drones have violated Polish airspace. NATO chief Mark Rutte on Wednesday slammed Moscow's reckless behavior and hailed the alliance's very successful reaction to counter the incursion. Russia's RIA state news agency quoted a Russian diplomat as calling the accusations of an incursion groundless and saying Poland had not given any evidence that the drones shot down were of Russian origin. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said today that he has asked NATO to open consultation under Article 4 of the alliance's treaty after Poland shot down drones in its airspace following what he called a large-scale provocation by Russia. And that is, as we read earlier, the initiation of NATO countries coming together in an alliance considering whether to initiate Article 5, which is the defense of NATO nations against an opposing power. Now, to Putin, my message is clear. Stop the war in Ukraine. Stop the escalating war, which he is now basically mounting on innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure. NATO Chief Mark Rutte said, stop violating Allied airspace and know that we stand ready, that we are vigilant, and that we will defend every inch of NATO territory, he said. Now, we also heard this from the United States as well. They have vowed that they will support every inch of NATO territory. Take a look here. Coming out today, the U.S. says that it will defend every inch of NATO territory after Poland shoots down Russian drones. And they are saying that if NATO goes to war, the United States supports NATO, that this will be World War III, that we will see this escalate. And we've heard the sides will be drawn. It will be the United States, NATO allies, Ukraine, Israel, all of our allies against Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. The sides have already been drawn. In fact, a lot of people saying we are already in World War III right now, that we had it start in 2022 with the Russia-Ukraine war. We just have not seen it go full-blown, full-scale World War III global conflict just quite yet. But take a look at this. People are wondering about the draft. This coming out September 10th, just 3 days ago. The U.S. hasn't had a draft since 1973, but the nation's men are required by law to register for selective services in the event of a national emergency. The Russian drone attack on Poland, a member of NATO, has escalated tensions in the region. So again, they're saying that this could be initiating Articles 4 and 5, getting NATO members ready for all-out war. Poland has invoked Article 4, and the world is waiting to hear how Washington reacts to another provocation by Putin. And as I shared with you, coming out today, Donald Trump has vowed action. We have heard that they will defend every inch of NATO territory, they being the United States. So this conflict with Poland, the ongoing war in Ukraine, and the situation in Israel has geopolitical experts concerned about what could be happening next. Between 65 and 69%, respectively, of respondents to the Atlantic Council's Scowcroft Center for Strategic and Security 2025 Global Foresight Survey somewhat or strongly agree that military scenarios with Russia or China could come to pass within the next decade. All of this is currently taking place, and Trump and his administration have recently decided to change the Department of Defense to the Department of War. And I shared that with you when it had come out. They're saying that we're not going to be on the defense. We're going to be on the offense. And right now, with everything going on in the world, the United States needs to be ready. Here you can see here the Department of Defense has rebranded to the Department of War following Donald Trump's executive order. More than 40% of those surveyed expected that there would be a global conflict on multiple fronts among the great powers. Of those predicting World War III, nearly two-thirds expected nuclear weapons will be used. Let me know, do you think we're going to be seeing a nuclear weapon detonated within the next 10 years? If you think so, put yes. If you think no, put no in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. 2 out of 3 of them foresee such a conflict playing out in space as well. Now, map of Russian strikes on Ukraine last night. Check out the top left corner. Significant incursions into Poland as well. This is no accident. It is a probing attack on NATO's defenses to assess readiness, deliberately calibrating to be below the threshold to invoke Article 5. So they're saying this was Russia just very gently poking at a NATO nation to see if they're ready, to see what the response would be, to see if they could get away with it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now, if that were to come to pass, the United States may need to call on more of its citizens to fight than currently serve in the various branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. The U.S. hasn't had a draft since January of 1973, but the nation's men are required by law to register for selective service in the event of a national emergency. Those who the United States would draft first if there were a war. Nearly all male U.S. citizens and male immigrants, regardless of immigration status, are required under federal law to register for selective services within 30 days of turning the age of 18. Late registrants are allowed until a man reaches his 26th birthday, but failure to do so is considered a felony and can result in penalty. The Selective Service website says that these include a $250,000 fine or 5 years imprisonment, ineligible for state-based student loans and grants programs in 31 states. You'll be ineligible for a federal job training under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, ineligible for federal and many state and local jobs, up to a 5-year delay of U.S. citizenship proceeding from immigration. In the event of a national emergency, the nation could call upon those registered to fill the ranks of the U.S. Armed Forces through conscription, normally called a draft. In order for that to happen, the first step would be a draft authorization. This would require Congress to amend the Military Selective Service Act to authorize the president to induct personnel into the armed forces. The next selective service system would be activated and all service personnel would be ordered to report for duty. Reserve Force officers, along with selective military retirees, begin to open area offices to accept registrant claims. The new signage of the War Department right there. Now, step 3 would be The lottery, which is a random drawing of birthdays and numbers, establishes the sequence in which individuals receive orders to report for induction. The lottery would be publicly attended, nationally televised, and live streamed. The first to receive induction orders are those whose 20th birthday falls on the year of the lottery. States the sequence of events for the Selective Service. If additional lotteries were needed, the sequence would begin with those who during that year turned 21 and then go progressively higher in age until you hit 25. Then a lottery for those turning 19 would be conducted, and finally 18 and a half years old as well. Now, Associated Press ex post Poland said early Wednesday that multiple Russian drones entered and were shot down over its territory with help from NATO allies, describing the incident as an act of aggression carried out during a wave of Russian strikes on Ukraine. Now, those called up would either provide personnel to the newly renamed Department of War, if authorized by the President or Congress, alternative services for conscientious objectors. After each lottery, induction notices are issued with orders to report to a local military entrance processing station. Once a notice has been received, registrants may now make claims, if desired, for a postponement, deferment, or exemption. At the MEPS, inductees will be given a physical, mental, and moral evaluation to determine whether they are fit for military service. Those that are will go into military service, and those that aren't will be sent home. The first inductees must be delivered to the military within 193 days from the draft authorization due to national emergency. You can check out the different classifications that would be put into effect if a draft were authorized on the Selective Service website. So there you have it. Articles like this coming out in the last 72 hours as we have seen things erupt between Russia and Poland, which is a NATO nation. The United States coming out today saying we will defend every inch of NATO territory against Russia. And now we're seeing articles coming out about a U.S. draft, concerns of World War III, and where we're going to be going from here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are we about to enter into World War III? Now, regardless of what unfolds, if there is some sort of peace agreement, ceasefire, negotiation deal that is made between Russia and Ukraine, if Poland and NATO decide not to pull back, or if we see things totally escalate and we go to all-out war and it is declared World War III, whatever unfolds, I'll be sure to keep you up to date here on the channel. So to stay up to date, hit that subscribe button. All the articles that I'm referencing, I put them on the screen, read right from them. They are hyperlinked in the description, so you can click them, see the dates, the sources. Try to hold myself to the highest level of accountability here on the channel, so that way you can know and rest assured that this is the latest. If you appreciate that, please take a second, hit that thumbs up like button for me. Helps out the channel a ton. But that is the latest as of today, Saturday, September the 13th, 2025. As more comes out, I'll let you know. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care. God bless. I'll catch you in the next one. This is Steve.